Hi, friends. Today I want to talk to you about some of my recent standout reads, the books that I finished off the summer with, my current reads, and we're going to dive into my fall TBR list. My first standout read was Stephen Graham Jones. Now, this book was published as two books in one. So we have The Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives. And I started with The Killer on the Road. This one was a lot of fun because it's this familiar trope of the hitchhiker. And, the idea of being out on the open road, you have this concept of freedom, but the caveat is the people you encounter on the road could be absolutely anyone. And Stephen Graham Jones does just that. He gives us this faceless person who really could be anyone. We have this idea of this killer, predator, and prey, but the prey is strongly refusing to be erased. So we have this idea of survival, and it is just a lot of fun. If you are someone who is looking for just a fun kind of slasher style book that could feel like the way movies used to feel back in the 70s, then you'll enjoy this book. But something that stood out to me about this book is that it's actually a little bit deeper than that. You could kind of find more heart in this book. Because another thing that Stephen Graham Jones does is he adds always a layer to it of Native American culture. And the message that he's giving in this book is this idea that your identity cannot be erased. So while we have this faceless killer who could be anyone, we also have this underlying idea that your identity is who you are and that can't be taken away. That was my cat. His books are a little gory for me, but because the story is so interesting and it's so well written that I can always look past it. So that was the first one that I read. And the second one was the second part of this book, The Babysitter Lives. And this one also took one of those classic tropes, the idea of the babysitter home alone with the kids. When you start off reading it, the people are talking about like this guy that's, been in the neighborhood bothering people. And you immediately think, okay, this guy's going to figure in later. But then we get some twists. It's the house itself that's haunted or different. There's something about this house. You can walk in behind the washing machine and come out in a bedroom upstairs. But you have rules to this. So it's fun to read this book and try to figure out what's going on and how this house works. But it turns out that if you don't play by the rules correctly, you can get stuck in this sort of parallel dimension. And that to me is just fascinating. I really found this story interesting. This one had a little bit more gore than I typically like in a book, but I also find it very interesting and very fun. So I definitely recommend reading this book if you're interested in kind of a modern, maybe it's a haunted house. The other thing I liked about it is that it was set at Halloween, and that really made me fall into this desire for fall reading and fall vibes. So from there, I decided to look up a haunted house book. And I went on to Libby for the library, and I downloaded a book called The Family Plot. It's a classic haunted house, one of those old, scary, big houses, but it's set in modern times, and the salvage company has been hired to go in and basically clean out the house. We followed this salvage crew to this house, and honestly, one of the things that I enjoyed about this book was that it reminded me of when I was a teenager and I lived in a small town. Everybody knows about like a haunted house, right? Well, we found an old graveyard that was just overgrown. And, it has the iron gates and signs, and the graves are just overgrown and they're old, and it's fascinating. And then we continued exploring because we saw off in the distance like the shape of a house. So we wander through, we found it's all gated up and blocked off, but we're dumb and we walk up there anyway. You could tell the house had been landscaped in the past because there's flowers growing everywhere and there's just weeds and it's just overgrown, and the house itself is dilapidated and it's boarded up. And of course, being the teenagers that we were, we wanted to know what was inside the house. So we're exploring, and the basement door is actually unlocked. And we found that we could actually go up into the house from the basement. So what do you do when you're a teenager and you find you can get into some boarded up place? Well, you keep going. We went into this house, obviously abandoned. It had layers of dust. It had been abandoned for decades, but it was really weird. It's one of those things that you would find only in a story, because it was as if the family had just left for the day. And then we went upstairs into one of the bedrooms, and there was a suitcase laid out on the bed, half packed and abandoned. It was the creepiest thing ever. And we explored, and we were, trying to make up stories about what could have happened, how this happened. We ended up spooking ourselves out because we imagined we were hearing footsteps, and, we weren't, but we were imagining it. And we just decided this house was haunted, and we were scared, and we left. That feeling is what this book reminded me of. And so you have these people that are staying in this house, and they're experiencing the haunted house. So it's your classic haunted house tale, modern times, but an old house and an old mystery, and it's just a lot of fun. Okay, so this brings me up to my current reads. I decided to pick up one that I have always wanted to read, and it is The House of Leaves by Mark Danielowski. And I know that this is a book that people either love or they hate, and I truly understand that. It's, got a cult following because it's a weird book, but it is kind of gimmicky. I mean, if you've ever flipped through this book, you know that it's not a book for everyone, but I find it very interesting. It's two stories in one. So on the one hand, you have this story about a house. It's sort of a documentation about a house, a really weird house. And then in the other story, you've got the guy who has found this book. It's a not published book. And, the guy that was telling the story wrote, he was blind, but he had just pages of book, but he also had scribbles on napkins and scrap pieces of paper. So you can kind of see the purpose for why it's printed this way. But then it's also got all these footnotes. Like you can just kind of see there's like an index to this book, and then there's just tons of footnotes at the bottom of the pages. And normally if you're reading a book that has footnotes, sometimes it's just citations and you can just read it and ignore those. In this particular book, you have to read the footnotes because it's where you find the story of the guy who is presenting the other book to us. So it's not just a straight across read. You're reading one story, and then in the footnotes, it jumps to the story of the other person. So it's not straightforward. It does involve going back and forth and shifting your brain from one thought to the other thought. But it's really interesting because you're seeing sort of the loss of sanity. I just find it interesting. And then another thing about this book that I like, it does have that whole creepy vibe thing. So to me, I do like a slow burn kind of scare. And this book has just some of the ideas in it that just creep me out. So an example, you can see I'm not very far into this book, but an example is the family just moved into this house. They go away for a few days. When they come back, they find a door with a little room or a little closet in it, and they don't remember it being there before. And they're looking back at their photos that they've taken, and they realize, no, this door wasn't here before. So that's creepy, right? It's just one of those things that just shouldn't happen. And when you think about that, what would you do? Do you call the police and say, hey, I'd like to report that someone broke into my house and built a closet? It's just weird, right? So these kind of things to me are creepy. And that's one of the reasons I really like this book. And I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. The next book that I'm currently reading is The Book of Doors. This one is by Gareth Brown. And this one became available through Libby from my library. So I downloaded it and I started reading it. I love this book. It's a lot lighter of a read than The House of Leaves. It's set in modern times, and we have just the world as we know it, but underneath it, there is magic to be found. And I love that kind of a story. I love it when you're taking just an ordinary person in an ordinary day and they discover something magical that has been there all along that nobody knows about, or only a select few know about it. So in this story, we're following our main character as she is gifted a book that contains magic. So with the particular book, it's the Book of Doors. It makes doorways magical. So she can open, let's say you could open your front door, go through the door and come out in another place, like let's just say Paris or anywhere else that you can imagine. So it's fun to read that. But then you're finding out about these other books that exist. So for example, it's like the Book of Misery, the Book of Luck. There's all these different books. And of course, when you have magic, you've got people who know about it, and that puts in a sense of danger to it. So there's people that want to have all of these books, and it's really fun. It's fun to discover the magic. It's fun to discover this world, and it's just interesting, and it's a light read. So I am really and truly enjoying this book. All right, so now let's move on to talk about some of the books that I'm looking forward to reading this fall. So first up, there's a classic one, and I honestly don't know if I've read this book or not, but it's The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And I say I don't know if I've read it because I sort of had a problem. Sometimes when I read a book, I can't remember if I've read it. I recently picked up We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, and I started reading it, and I'm like, I've already read this book. So it's kind of fun sometimes if you forget about them to go back and read them again, and then you're rediscovering it again. So I'm assuming I read this book, but I probably read it years ago. Another book that I'm looking forward to reading is called The House Next Door. And I discovered it just by going through and just searching for haunted house books online. And several people have said that it's a very overlooked book. It's just kind of a house that's modern. It's set in a normal neighborhood, but it's a haunted house, and people really love this book. They say that it's actually pretty spooky and really unique, and I'm looking forward to reading that one. Another book that I'm interested in that's, I think, a haunted house book. I don't even know if it's a haunted house book, but it's called The Staircase in the Woods. This one's fairly new. I've seen it in the bookstore before, and I honestly don't always read a lot about books before I read them. I'm somebody who will judge a book by its cover or will just take a recommendation. But from the little bit of reading that I've done about it, people say it's sort of like a different twist or a different telling of kind of a haunted house vibe book. So I feel like that would be a good book for fall. It is a newer release, but I honestly don't know anything about it. Have you read this book? If you have, tell me in the comments if it's good or not. Tell me if you think it's kind of a haunted vibe or not, because I'm picking it because it's kind of a haunted vibe, but maybe it's not. I don't know anything about it. For more of a witchy vibe and another newer release, a book I'm looking forward to is called The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And this one is sort of like generational witches, and that just seems like fall vibe all the way. So I am really looking forward to that one. I haven't read much about it. I just know that it's sort of a family of witches. One of my favorite books of all time was The Witching Hour by Anne Rice, and it was sort of generational, haunting, witchy kind of book. And I feel like that's just the kind of vibe that's fun to read around fall when it's, spooky season. So I'm looking forward to that one. Another kind of fallish book that I'm looking forward to is this one. It's called Lonely Hollows, and it's a book of short stories. It says 15 tales of folk horror. I really don't know what they're going to be about, but I found this one because I was browsing around in a local bookstore. It was actually a secondhand bookstore, but two of the authors featured in this book were there doing a book signing, and this was on their table, and I just thought it looked really interesting. And they had other books as well, but this one is just, the cover. I liked the cover of this book. So again, I don't always read about books before I pick them up. I judge a book by its cover, and this one just looks fun to me. So I feel like this will be a fun read. Last up for me in my current to be read pile it's a book called The Martians, and it's a nonfiction book. It is about how at the turn of the century in the United States, we had a really big craze about finding life on Mars. And apparently we were trying to send messages to Mars, and we were imagining that we were getting signals from Mars. Martians were talking to us. I really don't know. I just thought that sounded like it would be such a fun book. And I can't remember how I heard about it. I'm pretty sure it was on like either a new release, something I read on the internet, or possibly in a podcast. But all I know is I went to my library and I did a search for it, and I saw that it was on order. So I put a hold on it so that I could get it when the library gets it. So I am really excited to get this one. And it's just, I like a nonfiction book sometimes. I really like interesting nonfiction books. And it doesn't even matter what the topic is. It can be about some person. It can be a biography. I'm pretty open to nonfiction books because I find things that have happened in the world to be interesting. And I am just looking forward to this one. So that's on my TBR list. Now, my question for you guys, recommend some to me. Recommend some fall ones to me, because my TBR list is not set in stone. It's kind of early in the season. It's not yet fall. It's end of summer. And I am compiling my TBR list for fall. Right now, I'm leaning into haunted house vibes, but I could go more witchy. I could go more just general Halloween themed, cozy even. So suggest books to me. I am looking forward to fall cozy reading season, and I plan to share with you what I am reading, and I hope that you will share with me what you're reading. Thank you so much for watching today, and we'll chat again soon.